This three-part lecture series will concern the writing of the rhetorical analysis essay. This specific video is about the introduction. Before beginning, I do want to say that I believe that all writing must be organic or nothing at all. But the exam for the AP English Language and Composition demands that certain things be done at certain times, meaning that to ensure the successful writing of the rhetorical analysis essay, the writer has to follow certain guidelines, if you will. So, what follows are recommendations for the composition of that essay, the rhetorical essay. These recommendations are about the form and the structure, but everything else will come as the writer creates his or her own essay. Now, these guidelines work, and they work best when they are internalized enough to break free from them. I want to make that clear. Now, let's begin with the introduction. Introductions are best when they are succinct, quick, brief, to the point, especially for this kind of essay. Too short, it'll seem rushed. Too lengthy, it will seem like you're beginning a conversation that you might as well just begin in the body paragraph. So, 2 to 3 sentences is probably a good idea for an introduction for this kind of essay. Now, here are the don'ts. Don't make it too lengthy. You don't have the time, and the reader does not either. Don't talk about your personal experiences, neither in the intro nor anywhere really in that essay. You can save that for the argumentative essay. But for the rhetorical essay, you do not matter. Don't define rhetorical devices, especially in the introduction. You may want to do something like that in the body, perhaps, but not in the intro. Don't say that the writer uses a simile to compare, right? I mean, this is tacky. You're missing the point when you simply define the rhetorical device, as opposed to explaining what the device is doing. Here are the do's. Offer insight into the purpose of the writing as soon as you can. As soon as you begin the introduction, try to offer some insight into what the purpose of the writing is. After all, that's your job. That's what you're there to do. Now, misidentifying the purpose of the writing will definitely earn you an inadequate score in the exam. So you want to read carefully. This kind of essay is the one that rewards good reading as well as good writing. Identify the tone of the writing and try to implement that tone in your own writing. Show awareness of the tone of the writing by your selection of adjectives and verbs so that the reader can understand that you fully understand the tone that writer had when he wrote that thing. Identify the rhetorical devices. This is important, but explaining in general the effect that it has on the text. That's what's important. Determining how the device affects the or contributes to the making of the purpose of the text. Now, here are 4 basic things that you need to do in an intro. I'm going to go back to this slide at the end of the presentation because it is very important. Here are 4 basic things that you need to do. Provide context for the text. What is context? Maybe the writer's name, maybe the genre of the text, maybe it's a speech, maybe it's something else. Context. Provide the title of the thing if it has one. Provide the year, the situation happening around the year or where the text comes out of, right? That is what I mean by provide context. Establish the main idea of the text. As soon as possible, try to give me an overall idea, an overall explanation of what the text does. Identify the purpose of the text, right? For instance, if you tell me the writer is trying to accomplish A, and this is true, but you don't give me some sort of main idea or summary of what's happening, then I don't know how true your purpose is. So the last one is you want to present devices and the strategies. We'll talk about this as we go on, but these are the 4 things that you want to keep in mind when writing the introduction. Do they have to go in this order? No. Do I like them in this order? Yes. Can you move them around and still be successful? Yes, you can. All right, let's talk about the sentences. I'm going to go through it in steps. First sentence, second sentence, third sentence. Do you have to have 3 sentences? No. Can you have 4? Yes. Can you have 5? Maybe not. Can you have 2? I've seen it done. Can you have 1? That's kind of weird. But here's the first sentence and the second sentence and the third. This is the way I'll do it, okay? The first sentence helps you set the stage. Maybe the topic of conversation you identified, or the theme of this, or the speaker, or the occasion, meaning when it's happening, how it's happening, right? I prefer beginning with a compound sentence. A very lengthy sentence at the beginning is helpful in drawing the reader in. The first part establishes what we're talking about, and the second part introduces all the stuff that I need in order to move on to the actual important things like the purpose of the text. So that second part of the sentence introduces the speaker, the occasion, maybe the audience, to whom it is addressed, whatever. But this compound sentence allows me to set the conversation in place so that now I can discuss the things that I think are more important, the purpose and the strategies and devices the writer employs. So the first sentence sets the stage. Here is an example. To writers like Leonid Friedman, American society has historically adopted a scorning and ostracizing attitude towards the academically gifted individuals who form the intelligentsia. Now, this example moves things around so that I've got the topic and the theme later on, and I've got the writer right at the beginning. You see? So you can move it around and still accomplish the same effect. But why does this work? Because now I know that this is the guy who wrote it and this is the stuff he's talking about. So I can begin, or rather continue, my conversation. Here are some more examples of introductions. I've highlighted the one I really like. History tends to repeat itself in America, which may be for the better or worse. That is a terrible first sentence. It accomplishes nothing. From impressive Super Bowl commercials to silly infomercials, the everyday America is constantly targeted by companies through advertisements. This is a good introductory sentence. It lets me know where it's going. I know we're going to talk about infomercials. I know we're talking about marketing and advertising and how people are targeted. At least that's where I think it's going. But I don't know what text it is you attempt to analyze. This is a good first sentence, but it's very argumentative. So unless you identify where the information is coming from, then you might as well save that sentence for a little bit later. July 22, 1905, Florence Kelley delivered a speech to the Convention of National American Women's Suffrage Association in Philadelphia. I cannot tell you how many times I have read this same sentence over and over again whenever I score essays for the College Board. Every single time. This is exactly the way people begin. In this year, this person delivered this thing at this place. Oh my God. It's terrible. It's not terrible. Right? It gets the job done. But it's bad. It's pretty bad. Okay, here's one that I think is worthwhile. In a time of journalistic embellishment, I have some idea of where it's going. American journalist and politician Claire Booth Luce. See, now I know a little bit more about her. See, Florence Kelley delivered a speech. Who the hell is Florence Kelley? But when you say American journalist and politician Claire Booth Luce, I feel like I know her. Addresses the American press's lack of veracity, which they use to compose sensationalist stories and manipulate audiences. That's a very dense, packed sentence, but it's promising. And you want to make a very good first impression. It's the only impression you'll ever get. Second sentence. You want to establish the context of the conversation. Maybe you want to introduce the speaker. If you haven't done that already, you should have already. But this is a good time to do it. You don't want to wait till the third sentence to introduce the speaker. The situation, maybe what is happening, the audience. This is a good time to have that conversation. The idea here is that you frame the conversation. You frame the conversation. Summary is also a good idea. If you're thinking about those four basic things, here's where that main idea would go. Now, you want to keep in mind the following things. The writer. If you haven't introduced the writer, introduce the writer. If you have introduced the writer, then say something new about the writer. Call him a pronoun if you want. Say he's a lawyer. Say she's a doctor. Whatever. But you want to give me more info about this writer. The audience. You want to tell me who the audience is, right? The audience is never the audience. I hate it when the audience is the audience. The audience is a bunch of disgruntled women who want to earn the right to suffrage. That's an audience. The audience is not an audience. When you tell me the audience is the audience, all I know is that it's an audience. I need to know more about them. So try to humanize the audience as early on as possible, because the writer had an audience in mind that she was targeting. So you should be able to recognize who that audience is. Now, here's an example of that middle sentence. In his essay, America Needs Its Nerds, an indignant Friedman decries that there is a fundamental issue in how Americans view intellectuals and promotes a shift in attitude towards cultural perception and treatment of academics. Okay, this sentence gave me everything I needed. The first one talked about the whole intelligentsia and all that stuff. Now I know there's an essay, and this is what it's called. And this guy who we met before, right? Two writers like Leonid Friedman, but now we know an indignant Friedman decries, right? We've learned something new about him, and now we know what that essay is about. In fact, not only do we know what that essay is about, now we know what the purpose of the essay is about, which is we have an issue in America in the way we view intellectuals. And he is, meaning the writer, Friedman, he is promoting a shift in attitude towards a culture of perception and treatment of academics. Now we know more about the text. We understand the purpose of that text. I suppose what is left would be the strategies and devices. I'm going to give you some variations of the first and the second sentence so that you have some idea. I won't go over this in too much detail because this is more something for you to look at. So if you want to pause the screen and you want to write this down, take a picture of it, whatever. But this one is more for you to keep in mind. Here are some variations of the first and the second sentence together. These are sort of they're very rigid and they're prescribed, but they work. So, writer of the title establishes main idea of the piece, appealing to the audience. So the idea here is that you would fill in the blank with the corresponding information. And this should give you a sentence that is worthwhile and is effective. So any of these would work. All right. The third sentence. Here's where the thesis happens. Here's where I get the purpose of the text, unless it's been introduced already. Here's where I get the rhetorical devices and strategies. Sometimes the sentence can be really, really packed, really heavy. So the best thing to do is to break it up. Some people like to write the purpose in the second sentence, like the example I've been using, and the strategies and devices in the last sentence. Sometimes they make it two. That's okay. The thesis can be two sentences. That's not a problem. But it is often preferred a thesis statement. The key, though, is that the thesis should be at the end, right? I know there are many places where to put it. I know many teachers teach it in different ways. I know it can go at the beginning, in the middle, at the end. I know. But for this kind of writing, analytical writing, and for the AP Lang exam, for God's sake, put it at the end of the introduction. You're better off. Trust me. Okay. Things you need in a thesis. The writer's name or pronoun. The purpose. A strong verb. Very important. You want a good verb. You want a verb that says, I know what I'm saying. Rhetorical devices, rhetorical situation, and some adjectives that help you color the situation in the way you want the reader to understand it, right? These adjectives should denote the tone of the writing. Okay, now the thesis statement is essentially a what, how, and why. The idea is that you present your claim, your evidence, and your rationale, right? Tell me what we're talking about, how is it true, and why does it matter? That's the basic format of the thesis. Now let's look at it like this. The what is the claim of your essay? Essentially, your claim, or the claim of your essay, states your understanding of the claim and intention of the text you have read. So your claim is the identification of the claim and intention of the text that you have read. So you have to understand that your own claim is contingent upon your understanding of the claim or what you believe to be, what you perceive to be, the understanding of the text. Okay. Now, if you misunderstand the text, you'll have an invalid claim, so keep that in mind. How? This is your evidence. Here's where you prove things, right? The evidence sometimes is called the devices, or, the writer tries to convince us that we should lower prices by using metaphors and analogies. Well, that's insufficient, right? Though it does have the what and the how. But now we need a why, a rationale. Now, a lot of this information that I'm going very quickly on, I've already covered in other videos, namely the sample analysis. So if you look at that video, you'll see some of the things that I'm not explaining here, I've already explained there. So if you want a more specific, a more thorough understanding of that, look at those videos and the other videos on my channel so that you can understand it. Now, the rationale is the explanation of the evidence. It's the thing that connects the evidence to the claim, right? I believe A because of B, right? But you need a connection between the two. The connection tells me that my evidence is sufficient for explaining my claim. Okay, here's a thesis example. Now, this is already considering that we've already have two other sentences. He does so by appealing to national pride. How? through comparisons between America and East Asia, okay, and by using micro examples to exemplify the irony of how intellectuals are viewed. Okay, and what does this accomplish? In doing so, he creates a cohesive argument that condemns American attitude toward intellectuals and promotes intellectualism. There it is, right? So, why is it that this thesis works? Well, this slide, again, you can go on it by yourself, look at it by yourself, but I would rather explain what's everything that's in this slide by looking at the complete introduction. I think it will make more sense when we look at it. So, to writers like Leonard Friedman, American society historically adopted a scorning and ostracizing attitude towards the academically gifted individuals who form the intelligentsia of society. In his essay, America Needs Its Nerds, an indignant Friedman decries that there is a fundamental issue in how Americans view intellectuals and promotes a shift in attitude towards cultural perception and treatment of academics. He does so by appealing to national pride through comparisons between America and East Asia, and by using micro examples to exemplify the irony of how intellectuals are viewed. In doing so, he creates a cohesive argument that condemns American attitude toward intellectuals and promotes intellectualism. Wow, what a great intro, right? There's so many things that work, and I understand exactly what the text was about. I know where this essay is going. I have an idea, a blueprint, a roadmap of what it is that you're going to talk about, right? The topical sentence at the beginning headed the entire paragraph. It told me where it was going. It's a great introduction altogether. Here's a variation of the same introduction for the sake of making it shorter. This is only so that you can understand that you could accomplish this in less words, right? This is 3 sentences. All right. Leonard Friedman's essay, America Needs Its Nerds, decries the historical way in which Americans have viewed intellectuals, adopting a scornful and ostracizing attitude towards the academically gifted individuals who form the intelligentsia. His essay promotes a shift in attitude towards cultural perception and treatment of academics by appealing to a sense of national pride through comparisons between America and East Asia, and by using micro-examples to exemplify the irony of intellectuals, how intellectuals are viewed. In doing so, he creates a cohesive argument that condemns American attitude towards intellectuals and promotes intellectualism. Okay, what is the difference between this one and this one? Well, the difference is that this one breaks it up for you. Yes, it is 4 sentences, but it's easier to swallow. This one, it's so much. You're making it's difficult to chew through it, but it's the same information essentially, and they both work really well. But this is an example of how this one may be lengthier in terms of more sentences, but you walk the reader through your thoughts little by little. And this one, you're packing the reader with a lot of information that is good and the reader can handle, but maybe it's too much, all too sudden. So, just to give you that idea. Okay, let's recap the intro because this is very important. What do you want in the introduction? You want to provide a context for the text. Who's the speaker? What's the situation? What's the audience? You want to establish the main idea of the text right away. Tell me what the heck this thing is about. Identify the purpose of the text. Identify what you believe the writer is trying to accomplish. So, for instance, the writer gives a speech about the rise in steel prices. That's not a purpose. That's not even a good summary. You have to identify the purpose of the text. What is the writer trying to accomplish, and how, devices and strategies, is the writer accomplishing that? Now, for more thorough conversation on all of this, I have other videos that you can check out. For now, I'm done with the introduction, and we will continue with another video, part 2, which will be the body paragraph. That's it.